Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the closing session for the celebration of the fifth anniversary of the Inter-American Coalition for Regulatory Convergence in the Medical Technology Sector. It has been really tremendous 5 years since we started the work of the coalition, and we feel that the things that we have achieved had only been possible because of the contribution of all members, participants, partners that had been so generous to contribute to the work that we have been developing. We will start in, let's say, 1 minute to allow for our audience to get connected to the webinar. So we're starting in 1 minute. Thank you. Okay, we will get started. Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome again to our external stakeholder session that closes the celebration of the fifth anniversary of the coalition. We're very appreciative for all the support that we have received from all of you throughout these 5 years, and we are really very happy to have a great agenda for all of us to continue to learning on many different topics related to good regulatory practices, and in this case also having the participation of three national regulatory authorities that are going to be joining us in a panel session and learning about the medical technology sector in a broader scope as it is going on in Brazil, and I'll share the agenda in a bit. But before we're getting into all the details and the real interesting stuff of our session today, I'd like to share some housekeeping details. This session is being held in English and Spanish languages, and you can make access to the simultaneous interpretation through the icon that is located at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom platform. And as always, we record this session and we upload both the recording and the decks that are shared by our presenters in the website of the coalition. So we can make it available to all interested parties, and also for you to have it available for future reference. And as we always like to have these interactions to be really as such interactions, we would be very appreciative if you could capture your questions in the Q&A feature of the Zoom platform. With that, we can make sure that we're not going to be missing them. If we use the chat box, we are at the risk of not having full visibility of those. So please capture those in the Q&A section, so our panelists and our presenters are going to be able to share their responses with you. And as I was mentioning, we have a wonderful agenda today. We are having OECD with Manuel Gerardo Flores, who is coordinator of regulatory policy program, that is going to be sharing with us the latest on the work that OECD is doing in regards of the relevance of better regulation in worldwide. And we're having three wonderful panelists representing ANMAT, ANVISA, and COFEPRIS, Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico, that are going to be sharing with us their experiences in regards of the implementation of reliance and recognition. And last but not least, we will have a presentation in regards of a sector map of medical technology as it is occurring in Brazil and the Americas. And of course, in each of these sessions, we will have the opportunity for a Q&A, a dialogue and discussion, and we will have some closing remarks at the end of the session. So without further ado, thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much for all of our participants today. And Manuel Gerardo, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Sandra. Voy a hacer mi presentación en
Well,
español.
Thank you, Sandra. My presentation is going to be in Spanish.
Voy a compartir mi pantalla.
And let me just share my
Agradezco
screen with all
muchísimo a
of you.
todos
And I want to
organizadores.
thank
Este evento
all the
saludo con mucho
organizers of
gusto
this
a
event,
toda la audiencia
and
conectada.
I welcome
En esta
all
ocasión
everybody who
les voy
is
a hablar
connected
de
to the
la
session.
Red Iberoamericana
Today, I'm going to
Caribe
talk
Mejor
about
Regulatoria,
the
así como de
Ibero-American and the
algunos
Caribbean
de los
Network on
resultados
Better
que
Regulation,
consideremos
as well as some of the
publicado
latest
con
results
respecto a
that we
principales
have
herramientas de
published in
política
the
regulatoria.
OECD regarding the main tools for regulatory
Primero que
policies.
nada, un
So first
recordatorio
of all,
de
just a
qué es la
reminder,
OCDE,
what
de
is
dónde
the
salen sus
OECD?
recomendaciones, de dónde
Where
salen
are
sus
the
mejores
recommendations coming
prácticas.
from? Where are the best practices
La
coming
mejor
from?
forma de definir a la
Well,
OCDE
the
es
best way to
que es una
describe the
comunidad de
OECD
práctica,
is that
es una
it is
comunidad de profesionales,
a community, a practice
de
community of
funcionarios,
professionals,
expertos, académicos
of
que se reúnen
officials,
en
experts,
diferentes eventos,
academicians,
tienen que
scholars,
decir,
that
que se reúnen en
even
comités, grupos de
industry
trabajo,
representatives
además de
that
que
gather
hacemos
in
conferencias también y
committees,
tenemos campo
work
al
groups.
país.
We
Realmente es
also
una
have
comunidad donde se
conferences
juntan
and work in each
todos
country. And so
los
it's
actores
in reality,
relevantes
a
en la
place where
política
all the
pública
relevant stakeholders
y se
for
hace un
public
aprendizaje
policy
entre
get
pares.
together and where we have peer
Esto
learning.
es una diferencia fundamental con otros
So this is
organismos
the main
internacionales
difference that we have
que es
with
parecida un
other
poco a nosotros en nuestro
international
Comité de
organizations.
Progreso.
It's the one that is more similar to the
Tenemos los comités,
WTO.
grupos de
I
trabajo,
mean,
ahí
we
se
have
reúnen los
committees, work
profesionales
groups.
expertos
That's where the
de los países
experts
miembros y de
gather
las
of
instituciones
all member
representantes en
countries
un
and
tema
all the
específico.
representative
Tenemos todo tipo
institutions
como tres
regarding a
grupos de
specific
trabajo:
topic. We have
turismo,
many
pymes,
series of committees that have to do
eh,
with tourism, with
política
SMEs,
regulatoria,
with
competencia.
regulatory policies and
Y ahí
competencies.
es donde los
And
países
that's
que están
where
representados, que están en la mesa,
the
incluyendo
countries that are
miembros,
at the
países en vías
table
de
that are
acceso,
represented there, that include
países
members,
aliados, organismos
countries that
multilaterales
have access,
internacionales,
allies countries,
representantes de
international
asociaciones
organizations,
empresariales, representantes
representatives
de
of entrepreneurial
sindicatos. Ahí es
organizations,
donde se
representatives
discuten
of unions,
las
etc.
experiencias de los
That
países en el
is
tema de
where
política pública
they discuss
específico que
the
atañe al
experiences
comité.
the countries
Es
have
como una especie de terapia
regarding
de
the
grupo,
creation
es
of
decir,
policies. It's like a group
comparten los
therapy
retos,
session,
lo que funcionó y lo
where
que no
we share the
funcionó.
challenges,
Y
what
de
worked,
ahí
what
es
didn't
donde
work.
surgen
And
las
based on that,
recomendaciones,
we
donde
develop
surgen
the
los
recommendations.
principios, donde
That's
los
where
comités
the
discuten, modifican
principles
y
or the
salen y
principles
logras
come out,
movernos
where the
no solo con
committees
los países
discuss
miembros y
and talk
aliados,
about
sino con
things,
el
and you
resto del
manage to
mundo.
talk about not only with
Nuestro
the
lema
allied
es
countries and the member
políticas
countries, but
públicas
you also
basadas en
do this with the
evidencia.
rest of the world.
Y
Our
la
topic,
evidencia
our logo
precisamente
is
viene
public
de lo que
policies based on
experimentan los
evidence.
países
And the
miembros,
evidence
de los
comes
retos que
based on what
enfrentaron,
the
basado en
member
las lecciones
states
aprendidas
experience,
en la
the
aplicación de esas
challenges, the
políticas
lessons
públicas.
learned by
Y por
applying those
consiguiente, si
public
promovemos
policies in
políticas
their
públicas
area.
basadas en
So
evidencia,
if we
promovemos
promote
regulaciones
public
basadas en
policies
evidencia.
based on evidence, we also
Entonces,
are
la siguiente
promoting
vez que ustedes escuchen
evidence-based
alguna
regulations. So the
recomendación de
next
la
time
OCDE,
that you
no
hear
crean que
that we
viene
have a
de
recommendation
nuestros
from the
funcionarios de
OECD
la
to you,
OCDE, que pues
don't think
tienen
that these come from
capital
just the
humano,
officials of the
muchos externos
OECD that have a
porcentajes
lot
del
of,
mundo y
I
que
don't know,
saben
human
economía porque se han
capital
leído
that
el
have a
texto.
connection with
No,
everybody
las
and that
recomendaciones de la
know
OCDE
everything
provienen
in
por
the
información
textbook.
que
No, no, no.
viene
These recommendations
precisamente
don't come
de su
internally.
personal
They
como el que
come
está aquí conectado,
basically from
funcionarios que
people like
están en la
those who are
línea
he
de fuego
connected,
todos los
the
días,
officials
aplicando la
that are
política
in the
pública,
front line every
aprendiendo,
day,
teniendo su
applying public
experiencia y
policies,
compartiéndola con otros.
learning, having experiences, and
Lo que
sharing their
buscamos son
experiences
mejores
with everybody
políticas
else.
para una vida mejor
What
y
we're
en
trying to get
específico,
is to get
lo que
better
buscamos es
policies for a
regulaciones
better
para una vida
life.
mejor.
And specifically, we're looking for better regulations for a
La
better
OCDE
life.
cuenta ahorita con 38 países
The
miembros.
OECD has
Tenemos
38
4
member
países de
states,
Latinoamérica
and there are
miembros ya
4
plenamente:
Latin
México,
American
Chile,
countries as full
Colombia
members,
y Costa
which are
Rica.
Mexico, Chile,
Pero tenemos
Colombia,
3
and Costa
países en
Rica.
proceso de
There are
adhesión,
3
de
countries
acceso de
about to be
Latinoamérica a la
added
OCDE. Eso
to
incluye a
access
Perú,
from Latin
Argentina
America, which is
y a
Peru,
Brasil.
Argentina, and Brazil.
Eh, ¿Por qué nosotros trabajamos en Latinoamérica? ¿Qué es
Why
lo que
is it that we're
nosotros
working in Latin
ofrecemos?
America? I mean, what are we offering?
La narrativa que manejamos es
So,
creación de campeones en mejora
our
regulatoria.
narrative is to create
Un campeón es
champions for
alguien que
regulatory improvements. A
decide
champion would be
someterse a una evaluación
somebody who
imparcial
decides
internacional por parte
to
de la
be
OCDE
subject to an
para ver qué tan
impartial
lejos o qué tan cerca
international
están de estos
assessment
estándares
from the
internacionales,
OECD to see
de esas
how close or
recomendaciones o
how far they are
principios,
from these
y luego
international
qué se
standards,
tiene que
from
hacer
these recommendations
para
or principles,
acercarse o
and what
llegar a
needs
este
to be
estándar.
done to
Pero no
reach that
cualquiera
standard
trabaja
or
con la
get as
OCDE.
close as possible to that
Son realmente
standard. And so that's the
aquellos,
work with that
aquellos
the OECD
gobiernos,
does.
aquellas
So
agencias,
basically, those governments,
aquellos
those agencies,
países
or
que dicen:
countries that
yo quiero que
say,
me evalúen
I
internacional e
want to be
imparcialmente.
assessed
Yo le digo
internationally
cuando
and impartially,
hablo con
then
algún
I will
titular de
join this.
agencia, con algún
Whenever I
gobernador de una
speak to the governor of a region
"Ah,
or a
usted no nunca va a venir así
minister
porque
or the
para eso
head of an
estudia.
agency,
Para eso contrata
I'm not
consultorías.
gonna, I'm tell them,
Por eso
I'm not
contrata las
gonna
más
tell you
caras
what you
del
want to
mundo.
hear. For
Tú le
that, get a
pagas y van a decir lo que tú quieres
consultancy
oír.
firm. You can pay
En la
them and
OCDE
they're
lo
gonna
único
tell
que
you
tenemos
whatever
es
you want to
nuestra
hear.
reputación.
No, in the OECD, the
Lo
only
único
thing
que
we have
tenemos
is
es
our
nuestra
reputation.
credibilidad.
The only thing
Y
we
eso lo vamos
have
a
is our
defender hasta el último
credibility,
minuto, nuestra
and we're going to
imparcialidad.
defend that
Entonces,
till the
trabajar con
end,
OCDE es
based
sujetarse
on
a esa
our
evaluación de esos
impartiality.
estándares,
So if we,
hacer una
under
evaluación de
our
las políticas
framework,
públicas
you would
en esa
need to
materia
follow those standards. We
y
need to
luego
evaluate our
cómo se
public
puede mejorar. Y
policies based on that topic, and then we
agencias de
analyze
gobierno,
how do we
aquellos
improve those?
gobiernos, aquellos
And those
municipios, estados,
agencies,
regiones
those governments,
que logran
municipalities,
esa
states, or
implementación,
regions who
pues nosotros no
achieve
tenemos más que
to do
celebrar a
so
ustedes que son los campeones.
are celebrated, and
Esos
those are the ones
campeones los
we
definimos como
call
aquellos
champions.
gobiernos, ministerios,
So
secretarías o
champions are
agencias
those
que adoptan
governments, ministries,
recomendaciones de la OCDE y mejores
secretaries, or
prácticas y
agencies
principios
that
y que se
adopt
convierten
the
en
best
ejemplo para sus
practices and
pares.
principles of the OECD and they
Porque
become an example
aún
for
para
their
los países
peers.
miembros y todas
Because
las
even
recomendaciones de la OCDE hay una
member
obligación moral de
states
implementarlas,
have a
pero
moral
no hay
obligation
ninguna
to
obligación
implement
legal.
all the recommendations from the OECD,
Entonces,
but they don't
este es
have
el
a legal
incentivo que nosotros manejamos
obligation
para
to
que
do
haya
so.
interés en
So this is
implementarlo.
the
Además de que,
incentive that we
obviamente, la
have,
agencia
and
o
we
gobierno
manage for
se
the people
benefician
to
con
be
la adopción de
interested
esas
in
mejores
this.
prácticas
In
y de la
addition, that the
mejora de sus
agency or the
políticas públicas,
government
en este caso,
do
de la
benefit
capacidad
and
para cumplir o
improve their
implementar
public policies by
regulaciones de calidad.
implementing these recommendations,
Vuelvo a
because they are
insistir,
implementing regulations,
el lema de la
quality
OCDE es tener mejores
regulations.
políticas para una vida
So
mejor
the
y
logo
esas
is to have better
recomendaciones
policies, to
vienen
have a better
de
life.
funcionarios
That's,
como
I
ustedes
insist on
que
that.
están
And these
día a día
recommendations come from
batallando,
officials like all
trabajando
of you who
para
are in the
implementar
front
políticas
line,
públicas de
who are
calidad.
working day in and day out to implement quality policies.
La OCDE apoya y es parte de la red
So the
iberoamericana en
OECD
materia de
supports
mejora
and is
reglamentaria.
part of the Latin
Esta es una
American
iniciativa que apoya
Network
precisamente el
for
Comité de Políticas de
Regulatory
Mejora de la
Improvement.
OCDE
This is the
y el
committee
secretario técnico
that
lo
imposes
formamos
the
tanto
policies
la
here, and the
OCDE
technical
como el BID.
secretariat are part of the
Y
OECD
esto lo
and
que nos permite
the
es
BID. And
esta
what
misma
this
idea
allows us to do
de
so is to
el
have this
compartir
idea of
experiencias y recomendaciones,
being able to
experiencias
share experiences and
puntos de vista
recommendations,
lecciones
experiences, points of
aprendidas
view,
entre los países
lessons
de la OCDE
learned
es la misma idea
between
que se
the OECD
traslada a la
countries. And this is the
Confederación
same
Iberoamérica
idea
y que en
that
este caso
is
incluye a
used
todos
for the
los
Latin
países de
American
la región,
region. And this
prácticamente
would
todos aquellos
include
países que
all the
hoy por
countries in the
hoy
region.
están
Basically, I mean,
comprometidos
all
con
the countries that
un
are
gobierno transparente, un
committed
gobierno de
to
rendición de
have a
cuentas y que están a
transparent and
favor de
open
una
government
economía de
that
mercado.
is
Además,
accountable
hacemos
and that
Iberoamérica
is in
porque
favor
también
of a market
incluye a
economy. And
España y a Portugal.
we extend it also to
Este
Spain and
año
Portugal. So it's not
Brasil
only
fue
for Latin
coordinador,
This year,
junto con ellos
Brazil
como
was a
coordinador adjunto la
coordinator
República Dominicana.
with the
El año que
attached
entra,
coordinator
el
for
gobierno de la red va a ser
with the
República
Dominican
Dominicana
Republic.
con el apoyo
Next
de
year,
Perú.
we're going to have Dominican Republic as a coordinator with the
Es
support
una
of
comunidad
Peru.
práctica, intercambiamos
So it's a
experiencias sobre temas de
practical
innovación,
community. We
mejora
exchange
regulatoria, impacto
experiences
regulatorio,
on
simplificación y seguridad. Todos
innovation,
temas que tienen
uh,
que ver con la
regulatory
mejora en la
impact,
regulación.
as administrative
Hacemos de 2 o 3
simplification,
reuniones
all the
al
topics
año,
that
una
have to do with
física
a
y una
better
virtual.
regulation. We have two
La última
meetings,
reunión
one
la
physical,
tuvimos
the other
precisamente
are
ahora
virtual. The
en
last
el
meeting
29 y
was
30 de octubre
held
en
on October
Brasilia
the 29th and
y la
30th in
próxima va a ser
Brasilia.
en octubre
And
del
our next meeting
2026,
is
fecha
going to
por
be
definir,
in
en la
October of
República Dominicana.
2026, which we
Estamos
still
hablando con
have to
miseros
define the date,
mexicanos que
but it's
están en
going to
Punta
be in
Cana, puede
Dominican
que sea en
Republic.
Santo Domingo, pero ya
We're
veremos cómo nos va y
don't
les
want it to be in
avisaremos
Punta
con mucho
Cana. We
tiempo
want
de
it to be in Santo
anticipación
Domingo,
para que
but
nos
we'll
puedan
let you know
acompañar.
exactly where it's going to be. So, and
Esta
we'll
es
let you
la
know what time so
14ª
that you
reunión
can
que
be with
tenemos.
us.
La
This
red
is the
funciona
14th
desde el
meeting
año
that we had.
2015.
This network started
Antes de la
working
pandemia
in
teníamos 2 encuentros
2015.
al
Before the
año.
pandemic, we
Ahora ya
had
nada más
two
tenemos uno y el
in-person
otro
meetings.
es
Now we only
virtual.
have one, and the other one is a
El evento
virtual
fue
meeting.
organizado por el Ministerio
The
de
event was
Desarrollo, Industria y
organized
Comercio
by the
de Brasil, MIDIC,
Minister of in
con el apoyo
Development,
del MAP,
Industry,
el
and
Ministerio de Inversión
Commerce of
Pública, SEP,
Brazil, known as
para la República Dominicana, el BID y la
MDIC,
OCDE, que
with the
funcionamos como
support of
secretariado.
the Public
Durante 2
Administration
días nos
Ministry
enfocamos en 3
and the
paneles
BID
con temas
and the
expertos, no
OECD.
solo de
So we had
Latinoamérica
3
y funcionarios
panels with
públicos,
experts not
sino
only from
también de
Latin
países
America and
OCDE.
public officials,
Y tuvimos
but we
3
also had
paneles donde nos
the
enfocamos en
people from the
innovación para una
OECD
mejor
joining us.
regulación,
We had
de la
panels
regla a la
talking about
práctica,
innovation for
cómo
better
pasamos de
regulation,
lo que
from
dice la
rules
ley
to
a que funcione
practice.
la
How do
mejor
we go from
regulatoria
what the law
y
says
también
to
una
make sure that
evaluación de efectividad
regulatory
de la política
enhancement
regulatoria.
works?
Tuvimos
And
unos
also
paneles, estos
how
3
to
paneles,
understand the
con al menos
effectiveness of a
3
regulatory policy. So we had many
Cada uno de
panels.
ellos
we had these three main panels with three panel members in each one of them, but we also saw that there's a huge appetite to have smaller groups, and in those smaller groups to talk about classical topics as well as other topics that have to do with regulatory enhancements and other topics, So we had these also workshops that talk about institutionalization of regulatory policy, how to measure cost, administrative simplification, and the strengthening of the stakeholders, the strengthening the participation of stakeholders. And so here we talk about case studies that are not real, but based on real experiences. And here we can talk and discuss more between peers in these work sessions. So this is something that we're already doing in this network. And we also wanted to let you know that before the pandemic, this network was a closed one because we only had the participation of the oversight board and those that are in charge of regulatory policies, but today everybody and anybody can participate both in person or virtually. Because of that, we have more than 150 people in person and more than 200 people connected online. And as I said, our next meeting is going to be held in October in Dominican Republic. And at the end of this presentation, you're going to see our contact information where you can follow us, and that's where we can inform you about this and any other events that we can have. They gave me 20 minutes to talk, and I think I've been talking for 11 minutes. So I still have 9 minutes to talk about the main results that the OECD has identified and has approached here in the use of Latin America, how to use these policies in Latin America. This is based on a reflection of where we're at and where we have to go to. What is our path for the future? First of all, I always like to identify first the basics, what is the most important thing. And for that, we need to understand what the regulations are for. They say sometimes, oh, that's obvious, but I know that here I'm preaching to those who have already converted. But I had a boss that already retired that says, he always said, we have our master policies, or those that are on top that make the decisions that are chosen, especially people in Congress normally don't understand, or they don't understand what regulations are for. And we need to remember and we need to let them know that regulations need to work for people and for the planet. They need to help the countries to efficiently use regulations. That's what regulatory improvements means, to see all the instruments, the regulatory management instruments, and the impact of consultations and everything that you have to help the countries in the different economic, social, environmental agendas. So that is a priority. The governments need to prioritize what the people need in those environments, in those areas. And the regulation is just a means to achieve those objectives. And these mainly have to be to cover economic, environmental, and social topics. Now, considering that framework, I would thus like to focus on three tools that are widely used and that are highly promoted by the OECD. So one is the ex-ante assessment, then citizens participation, and the ex-post assessment. So these three tools, together with this monitoring and the concepts of costs versus benefits and the evidence of effectiveness, are needed to understand that if we have the necessary discipline by preparing and emitting and issuing regulations and their implementation, the objective is for these regulations to comply with the objectives of helping the planet and to minimize all the negative effects that these may generate. When we are designing the regulations, we have the ex-ante assessment, the IEM, the regulatory impact, the standardization impact, so that afterwards, if this standard is issued, when we go to implementation, we need to monitor it and we need to assess it. and then we go to the
La
ex
norma ya se
post
emitió y se supone que
assessment.
tenía que
If
resolver
it
el
was
problema.
already issued, it supposedly
Resolvió,
had
lo
to solve
resolvió.
an issue. So we
Estamos en
need
el
to
camino
assess if
adecuado,
it
si
was
no, ¿por
solved
qué?
or not, if we're in the
En
right
este
path or not, and if
proceso,
we're not, then why didn't it
hay veces que
work?
las regulaciones
And
quieren
throughout
tener
this
más
whole
beneficios que
process, we
costos.
want regulations to create more benefits than
La idea
costs.
fundamental del
That's
ex
the main
ante es decir,
idea, you
oye,
know, the ex
vamos
ante
a
main idea is to say,
asegurarnos que
okay,
las normas
we're
generan
going
más
to make
beneficios que
sure
costos.
that these standards will create more
Evidencia de su
benefit than
efectividad.
costs.
Y para ello
That's
la
the proof
participación
of their
ciudadana,
effectiveness. And
el
for
ir y
that,
preguntar,
citizens'
el ir a recolectar evidencia
participations,
del
going and
problema que se está
asking
tratando de resolver,
questions or
de las
gathering evidence
alternativas, de los
of the
costos que va a
issue
generar
that's
para
been
los
tried to
operadores,
solve,
de
of
los
the
beneficios para
options,
los
of the cost
ciudadanos,
that will
solo se
create
puede
for the
obtener
operators, of the
consultando.
benefits that the citizens will have.
Siempre lo he dicho y
All
lo
of that will
repetiré.
only be obtained through
Yo
consultation.
encuentro
I've always said it and I will
sumamente
repeat it. You know,
soberbio
I believe that it's
y de
quite
gran arrogancia que un
arrogant
funcionario público desde su
for a
escritorio
public official
quiera
to be
entender cómo
seated
funciona
behind
el
his
mundo real
desk, and
sin ir y hablar
that's
con
where
los
he wants to
actores.
understand, or she wants to
Las
understand how the
regulaciones del
real
territorio
world
son
works
regulaciones de
without
mala
talking to
calidad
the
porque no
stakeholders.
pasan por un
You know,
proceso
the
de consulta
desk
pública.
regulations are bad quality because they don't go through
Tengo
this
5
public
minutos, 4 minutos.
consultation
Miren,
period. And I still have 4 minutes, so let's continue.
este proviene del estudio del
Now, this one
que se
comes from
publicó
the
a
Outlook
finales, a
study
principios de este
that was
año.
published at the
Y aquí
beginning of this year.
nosotros comparamos las
And
prácticas
here we
de
are
consulta
sharing
pública de
public
los
consultation
países
practices
miembros
of
y que de las leyes que
our member
provienen de los
states.
reglamentos, no de
And
leyes. No tengo, tenemos también la gráfica de leyes, pero estas son las gráficas que luego
this is
vienen
not
de
coming
la
from the
regulación que
law.
se emite
That we
después
have
de la
another
ley
one
de
from the law.
regulación
I
subordinada,
mean, there's another
reglamentos,
one that's called a
acuerdos, directrices y
subordinated
decrees.
law that is the
Una
regulation for
barrita más
agreements and
alta
decrees, but it's a different
indica
chart than
que
this
el
one. This
país
one
es más
doesn't
cercano
come from the law.
a lo que la
But the
OCDE
highest,
recomienda
the
o
bar,
se
it means
entiende
that
como
the
una
country that
práctica
is
exitosa.
closest to what the OECD
Estamos hablando de
considers
consulta
successful
pública.
practice is
Tenemos
closer to
aquí
that. This is public
los que más
consultation
sofisticado
only.
tienen su sistema
And
de
so
consulta
we
pública,
have
la Unión Europea.
the most
Luego acá
sophisticated
tenemos
one
los países que
is the
están entre
European
promedio de la
Union,
OECD.
and then we have all the other
Entonces
countries
tenemos
and the
aquí
average for the
de los que
OECD.
están por encima promedio de
And
la OECD,
here
Colombia apenas
above
un poquito por
OECD, we have
encima,
Colombia, just a little bit
Costa Rica
above,
también,
Costa
y
Rica.
aquí está México. Esta
This is
medición, estos
Mexico.
fueron
Now,
datos
this
del
measurement, this data
2023,
is
antes de la gran
2023
reforma
data.
que se hizo en
This was
México y
before
las
the huge
prácticas que cambiaron.
reform that
Esta
occurred
fue
in
la
Mexico and
fotografía
the practices that they're
previo
carrying
a que
now
estamos
today.
en México.
This was
Y
an
por acá tenemos a
image
Chile, que
that's
todavía tiene
prior to those
muchas áreas
changes in
de
Mexico.
oportunidad
And here we have
para
Chile that
mejorar
still
su
has a lot
práctica
of
de
areas of
consulta pública
opportunity
en
to improve
los
their
segmentos
public
regulatorios
consultation practice
subordinados. Estos son
practices
temas
and
centrales.
their
Ahora vamos a
subordinated
hablar de la IR,
regulatory
del RIA,
instruments, which are not
las
law. So
prácticas.
that's still missing. But let's
Tenemos el
talk about
promedio
the
de la OECD,
practices. We have the
de los
OECD
países más o
average
jurisdicciones con más
of the
sofisticación. Tenemos aquí
countries
Unión
that
Europea todavía.
have
México
with
antes de la
more
reforma, vuelvo a insistir.
regulations is European Union,
Pero
Mexico
tenemos aquí
before the
todavía
reform. I want to
países
remind
como
you that. But we
Costa
also
Rica,
have
también está un
countries
poquito
here
por
like Costa
encima del
Rica,
promedio de
which
la
is a little
OECD.
bit above the average
Luego
of the
tenemos a Colombia,
OECD. And then we
a
have
Chile,
Colombia and Chile
está Chile aquí bastante rezagados.
that are
Me
quite
decía un jefe que tenía en esos países, me decía,
lagging.
no digas que estar por
There
encima
was
no
another
significa
boss that
perfecto. No,
was
se debe
telling
de
me
estar
that, oh,
muy
don't
bien.
say
No,
that
hay que estar muy por encima del
that
promedio de la
it's
OECD.
good to be
Bueno, aquí está
above
Costa
or
Rica.
near the
Todo esto
OECD average. You need to
no
be way
incluye
above it.
órganos
And so
regulatorios
that's where Costa Rica is
independientes.
at. And this
Esto
does
solo
not
incluye la
include
práctica del
independent
gobierno central.
regulatory stakeholders.
Y
This is
los que
just the
entran dentro
practices
de este
from the
esquema,
central
por ejemplo, en
government
Brasil
and
no
those that are
incluye
part of the
Anvisa, no
scheme.
incluye
For example, in
reguladores
Brazil, we're
independientes,
not
pero en México sí
including
incluye
Anvisa or
inclusive
other
Cofepris,
regulatory
etcétera. Dependiendo del nivel de
agencies. In
independencia del
Mexico, it does
regulador,
include the
es si se
COFEPRIS. It
incluye o
all
no en
depends
esta
on the
práctica.
experience and the participation of the regulatory
Finalmente,
agencies
evaluación ex
is
post.
if they are included or not
Este es
in this
como el
practice.
hijo
Then we have the ex
que no le
post
ponen
assessment.
atención los
This
países de
is
la
like the
OCDE. Como pueden
child
ver,
that
el
normally
promedio es
is never
bastante
paid
bajo.
attention to. You can see that we have a really low average
Y
here.
tenemos de nueva cuenta a
And
Costa
once
Rica,
again, we
Chile,
have Costa
Colombia muy por
Rica,
abajo del promedio de
Chile,
la OECD.
Colombia, way
Solo
below
México
the
por
average,
encima.
the OECD
Repito, todo
average.
esto
Only
previo
Mexico
a
is
la
above
reforma.
it. And once again, I want
Hay
to
mucho
specify
camino
that
por recorrer.
this was before the reform. There's still a
Aún en
lot to
niveles
be
de países de
done.
la OCDE.
Now, even at the level
Vuelvo a
of
insistir, las regulaciones se supone
those
que
countries
tienen
that
que
are above
ser
the OECD.
para
As I
mejorar
said before, the
personas y el planeta.
regulations are used to
Y la mejor
improve
regulatoria debería
the
ayudar
life
con
of
eso.
people, the planet, and
Sabemos
regulatory
que,
improvements have to
oye, es
do
que luego
that
los
precisely. Yeah, we know, and they say, oh, the REA, the consultation, it's very bureaucratic, it's not working, but that means that it has a bad design. It's not working because of that. So we are here to help the agencies to adopt those tools, to improve them, and to use many others like regulation-based, risk-based regulation, data-based regulation, the border topic, something I can't talk about right now, but that you can invite me some other time so that we can talk about this more in depth, This is information. These are our contact information, and that way you can find out if our meeting is going to be in Punta Cana or in Santiago. But this is all. Thank you. Thank you, Manuel, and thank you for sharing. Obviously, there are many good experiences, but there's still many challenges still, that things that need to be solved. We have a couple of questions from our participants. The first one was from an anonymous participant that talks about what is a period for public consultation in Europe, or how long is a public consultation done in Europe for how long period, how long of a period? The minimum goes from 3 months all the way up to 6 or more months. It depends on the impact of that regulation. In some cases, well, I would say it goes from 1 month to 6 months. But here at the OECD, we are considering, or we recommend to have it for enough period based on the importance of that one. I mean, not to publish something after 3 days of public consultation only, and just publish it as is. No. I mean, the countries in Europe, the members of the OECD have these public consultations open from 1 month to 3 months, and they apply the proportionality criteria, which means that if you have a new regulation for chemical precursors that have a huge impact, then they are going to allocate 3 months for public consultation. If the other way, if they're only going to update a specific standard, well, they can work just only for a couple of weeks for public consultation because it's a specific change that has a limited impact, and so it's limited based on that importance. Thank you, Manuel. We have another question from Elsie Ramirez Cifuentes. She's asking about what strategies would you recommend to increase citizens' participation? Because in the calls that we've made, we have a very low participation. And likewise, how can we measure cost and benefits when information is limited? Thank you very much.
Hay un efecto muy interesante en la consulta pública que luego se le
There's
llama
quite an interesting effect of public consultation, which is called regulatory fatigue. There comes a point where stakeholders and all the groups say, oh, but you're consulting me about this, about that, about all these other things, and I cannot waste my time with all of this. I cannot spend all my time dedicated to this. And so the answer to that is we have to base this on the proportionality criteria. Not all regulations require the same level of analysis. Thus, they're not all of them have the same level of in-depth development and consultation. So there's several strategies that we can follow. One is just make a public consultation of those things that have a huge impact, do this in-depth consultation. And for those, make sure that you as regulator are looking for your stakeholders and are telling them, oh, this is a high impact one, and I do need your comments on this. Of all the other things, just check my website and see if you want to make any comments. But these that are high impact ones, just contact your stakeholders, the groups that you're interested in getting comments from, and say, okay, this is a high impact one. Review it. I want your comments. I want your validation, and make sure that we have it. Because as I said before, if everything is important, nothing is important. So if we publish 10 things and we say that the 10 things are equally important, then they will say, well, why do I want to analyze 10, So do this proportionality criteria. And for cost benefits, it's the same idea. Information that we've gotten from countries like the European Union, Mexico, the European Commission, the United Kingdom including, is that of the 100% of all the regulatory instruments that will be issued, those that create a cost and a cost impact is around 30% of them. And of those 30% of them, only 10% of that 30%, which at the end of the day is like 30% globally, would require a monetized analysis of the cost benefit. The rest of them can be identified with other techniques like, I don't know, multi-value analysis, where we're going to give several weighing to all the different points, or maybe just a quick analysis for public officials to do a critical analysis and identify the costs, the benefits very quickly to realize that the benefits are zero, but maybe the cost could be very high. I mean, don't get obsessed with just capitalizing the cost and benefit and talking about how much it would cost. That would only be for the 3% of all the things that are issued. The rest of them, just with a qualitative analysis, we can do it, but sometimes, and you don't even need the qualitative analysis.
Manuel, muchísimas gracias.
Wonderful, Manuel. Thank you very much. And you've already assured another invite in the future, because there are 3 questions we won't be able to respond right now, but you'll get them so that at some point you can help us answer those questions and we can share the answers with the audience. That'll be appreciated. And there's a hand raised. Somebody wishes to open a mic and ask a question, but unfortunately we don't have that time. That is why I'm certain you will be invited once again, because there are so many other things we need to discuss with you. You have explained it very clearly. This is something that we speak about over and it's still very current, and it still needs the work of everyone so that we can move forward, as you said, to benefit, in a particular case, patients with the best regulations possible. So, Manuel Gerardo, congratulations for the work you are all doing. Thank you very much for the collaboration, the participation with the coalition, and with all of the members. We appreciate you. Thank you. And I hope you have a rest of the day very successful. And you will be back during the panel with the regulators, because as you've mentioned, the work of the OECD is with the regulators directly, and that is very transcendental. And we have a very interested group in learning more about the collaboration with the OECD. So thank you so very much, and we'll listen to you later today. And with this, we will now begin with our panel with the regulatory authorities of the region. We have the presence of Lorena Terrizano on behalf of MAT, Augusto Gueye from ANVISA, and Angelica Celaya on behalf of Mexico. So I will read very quickly a little bit of their bios. Very succinctly. I'll do it in English. And in the case of Augusto,
a specialization in sanitary law and a master's degree in material science and engineering. He currently works in the International Affairs Office of the Brazilian Health Regulatory Agency. Previously, he served as head of the Medical Device Office, leading strategic initiatives to improve the regulatory framework for medical devices in Brazil. Additionally, he has held roles as senior advisor and deputy general manager of the Medical Devices Office and as manager of the Office of In Vitro Diagnostics, contributing to the development and implementation of strategies to ensure the safety and efficacy of medical devices. Since joining ANVISA in 2005, he has consistently represented the agency in various international technical working groups and committees, playing a key role in aligning Brazilian regulatory practices with global standards and enhancing international cooperation. In addition to Augusto, we have Lorena Terrizano. She's a chemical engineer, and just give me 1 second to align this. She has spent over 25 years working at ADMAT, which is Argentina's regulatory agency for health products. She joined the agency in 1998 while still a student, and has since worked in various areas, gaining a broad perspective on the challenges and opportunities of health regulation. From 2019 to June 2024, she served as training and research coordinator, leading training projects, knowledge management initiatives, and institutional strengthening efforts. Since June 2024, she has been the director of the National Institute of Medical Products, where she leads initiatives aimed at modernizing regulations, promoting international convergence, and supporting technological innovation with a focus on patient safety. Her career combines technical expertise, a passion for collaborative work, and a strong commitment to the regional regulatory development. And representing COFEPRIS, Today, Angelica Celaya is joining us. Angelica is a medical doctor and surgeon. She has over 15 years of experience as public servant. Angelica is a technical expert providing opinions on the specific technical committee for medical instruments and equipment and on the osteosynthesis and endoprothesis committee of the Compendium of Health Supplies. She participated in the development of guidelines for obtaining sanitary registration for software as medical device, in addition to participating in reviews of Mexican official technical regulations. She currently serves as coordinator of the Equivalence Reliance Working Group and as a specialized evaluator in the area of medical devices at COFEPRIS. Welcome, the three of you. And I'd like to open the floor to Lorena for her to share her experiences in the implementation of Reliance and Recognition. And thank you very much, Lorena, for making the time to join us in this event. Gracias, Lorena.
Gracias. Thank you very much. Gracias, Sandra. Voy a hablar en español.
Thank you, Sandra. I'll speak in Spanish. I apologize. I'll start sharing my slides now. And so while my presentation will be done in Spanish, it was wonderful to hear my resume in English. It sounded so good. Thank you. So can you see my screen now? Good morning, everyone. First, I would like to thank Sandra and the Coalition for Convergence on Medical Devices. Thank you for the invite to participate. Very briefly, let me share with you a little bit of the perspective and the path that Matt has gone through in terms of Reliance, a tool that we believe is meant to strengthen our regulation and thus move towards a model that is smarter, more efficient, and collaborative more than anything else. So let us start providing some context. We all know what this is about, but anyway, Reliance is something that we need to be reminded of. It is an act of regulatory authority that can completely or partially make reference to the authorities of other regulatory authorities to make their own decisions. So Reliance is a way in which we construct a modern regulation that is based on trust in a systematic way, with very clear processes and with a perspective that is shared about what quality, efficacy, and security should be. Let me begin by telling you about the strategic plan of ANMAT for the period 2024-2027. Reliance has played a very important role, starting with the first objective. We propose to move forward towards a convergence, reliance, and optimization criteria for our regulations. There are three lines of actions. First of all, to strengthen agreements and cooperation with other authorities. That means to go deeper in agreements and collaborations we have with others, and also to provide reciprocal trust spaces and to agree upon reliable systems for Reliance, including shared standards, discussions to reduce the asymmetry and also to facilitate standardized interpretations. The third line is all about creating reliable and trustworthy information systems. Reliance cannot happen if we don't have public, verifiable information, because without data, there's no way we can make this work. So this is tied to the strategic objective number 3, which is all about strengthening the international presence of organization. In this regard, the participation of ANMAT in different convergence is highlighted, as well as in the consolidation of memberships. We are currently actively searching for Argentina to be a part of the board where the future of regulation is decided. So Reliance, as you see, is a very important role of our strategies as ANMAT for the next 3 years. A very specific example of institutional reliance in our country has to do with the simplified procedures by the CCO, the Free Sale Certificate Acceptance of Provision 9688/2019. In Article 9688, it says that when a medical device has already been approved by a sanitary authority that works with similar standards to ours, and MAT can accept the device as approved as well. And this is a way in which we guarantee three things: to avoid a duplicity of evaluations, we optimize technical resources for the regulatory authorities, and we accelerate access to safe and high quality technologies. And obviously, without losing anything, because we're not eliminating requirements, but we accept what other people have already reviewed based on trust and the available evidence. For instance, the applications that we get are around about 90% for serial. And for medical devices of 1 and 2 medical risks, the maximum time for the procedure is of around 15 days. On the other hand, we're also evaluating the use of links to the official databases to validate the information of these letters of CLBs, and this could avoid redundancy in the procedures or documents and would provide us with a gain in the timeframes. As of 2022, we have been working with the Good Practices Manual on Reliance. It's a document that defines procedures and establishes certain requirements. The premise is simple: to regulate based on the best efficacy possible without duplicating processes that have been carried out by other reliable authorities. In this manual, we also established that Reliance strengthens the sanitary system, allow us to have a better management of public health, reducing critical times without losing rigor. It accelerates the incorporation of new technologies, it promotes cooperation amongst authorities, and it can improve the answering capabilities of everyone. It is a way in which we are practicing a smarter type of regulation. There's a landmark that we have achieved in international cooperation, which is the Mutual Acknowledgement Agreement between ADMAT and ANVISA, signed in 2023, 2 years ago. This agreement acknowledges the CLBs of both authorities for 1 and 2 products, including in vitro AMP types products. So in reality, both systems acknowledge one another, and with this we reduce documentary duplicity, time for accessing the market is reduced, and a reliable reciprocal framework is created between the two countries. We believe that this type of agreement raises regional convergence and paves the way for broader initiatives for the future. At a national level, one of the best examples of this is the MDSAP, which is an acknowledgement of auditing done by others. If a producer has already been certified by an auditing authority, the others acknowledge that as well. This is a unique process that has been accepted by different authorities like Australia, Japan, the US, and others. So what does that mean? That each agency uses the information of an audit previously done instead of having to do their own inspections. Reliance applied to surveillance of quality systems is a mechanism that on the one hand reduces duplicity of audits, as well as reducing the load for all the authorities, since we accept what others have done before. It optimizes resources and it raises the safety and security standards for everyone. That is why we believe it is very important for us to participate in this group with this perspective. The Reliance model has exposed controls. We heard Flores speak about this modality of regulation. In Argentina, our regulations are moving towards the ex-post control. This is something that we truly need to go deeper in, and Reliance is a strategy that we can use for that purpose, because in the systems that are moving towards the more flexible models, Reliance becomes of the essence. Why? Because if the regulators have lower workloads, then other things can be strengthened, such as surveillance, traceability, early warning systems, adverse events channels, and technical cooperation with other agencies. Let us speak about the role of Argentina and their participation in the IMDRF. This forum, International Medical Device Regulators Forum, is a space where the main regulatory authorities of the world, SDJ, DGA, MDA, Health Canada, Anvisa, and others participate. They create common medical frameworks for medical devices and in vitro devices and products. We are a member of this forum, and our participation is key for promoting international trust, because we are acknowledged as a regulator that is respected by peers. So we believe that Argentina participating in IMDRF is a very good example of Reliance. We work based on international trust. Regulatory decisions are based on common standards that are developed all together amongst the most advanced societies. We believe that this is Reliance at its best. Reciprocal trust that is based in regulatory capacity. Active participation of organization and MAT in this forum can help us on the one hand to make decisions that are based on international standards, and because by adopting the IMDRF guidelines, we're reducing the regulatory distance with the more advanced agencies, and it also facilitates mutual acknowledgement. When Argentina is aligned with IMDRF, other countries believe more in us, in our decisions, and like with Anvisa, we can work on new projects. And by better responding to technological breakthroughs, because IMDRF includes criteria for medical devices, security for products, and others are of the essence, it accelerates regional convergence. Since we are active members, we can promote and propose things to accelerate things that helps everyone. So the conclusions we can reach, on the one hand, the future of regulation will be more collaborative based. We cannot respond alone to the speed of innovation. We need to trust, cooperate, and create standards together. And because of all of this, Reliance is not only a technical tool, but rather it's a strategic decision to protect public health with more efficiency, transparency, and regulatory intelligence. Thank you so much for having listened to me. I will be available for your questions and comments. Thank you. Wonderful, Lorena. Thank you very much. We will now listen to Augusto Heyer from Anvisa, and then Angelica, and we will be gathering questions and have a Q&A at the end, because I'm certain many questions will be common for our speakers. So we will wait until the end of the presentation for asking the questions.
Sandra, just to confirm that you can see my screen. I hope it's working.
Yes, it is working. Thank you.
Great. So then first, I'd like to thank you for the invitation for Anvisa to participate in this webinar. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be involved in this initiative with colleagues from different jurisdictions and from the Inter-American Coalition. So then today we are going to talk about the reliance with medical devices, the experience that we have in Brazil. So then just as an introduction, Anvisa is the Brazilian Health Regulatory Agency. we have in our mission to promote and protect health of the Brazilian population and to promote access, reducing risks, and supporting the development of the country in integrated action with the Brazilian Unified Health System. So with that, we always consider the possibility to improve the access of the population to innovative products. So in our vision, we have to be an innovative and reliable health authority for the entire society. In terms of values, we have the systemic, articulated, and integrated vision with the unified health system, transparency in communication and integrity, excellence in service provision, knowledge as a source of action, innovation, and sustainability. So Anvisa is composed of 5 directorates, and each directorate is responsible for the regulation of different products, inspections, GMP certification, also controls of borders and airports. So it is a wide range of responsibilities that we have in Brazil. Then also regarding the strategic plan and value chain of Anvisa, it was proposed in 2024, so it was valid until 2025. And one of the main points that we have here is to promote the usage of data. Not only data that is provided by the companies for the registration of products, but also data that is available from different jurisdictions, different regulatory authorities that are our partners. So the objectives that we have in this strategic plan are aligned with the promoting of health, innovation, and development, and improving public management. So the focus is on generating value for the society and strengthening the regulatory environment. One of the main strategic key results that we have in our strategic plan is to develop alignment and eventually recognition with some regulatory authorities that we have started already. So we have Colombia with the INVIMA, we have Mexico, COFEPRIS, Peru, DGMID, Chile, ISP, Australia, TGA, Egypt, EDA, Malaysia, MDA, Mexico, again, COFEPRIS in terms of GMP inspections, and the United Kingdom, MHRA. So all those authorities, we have some initiatives to promote some sort of reliance to make it in place in our jurisdiction. Of course, this involves not only medical devices, but medicines also, and in some of those registration of products and GMP inspections are the main targets. So Anvisa has a very strong commitment to good regulatory practices. We adopt instruments such as the regulatory impact analysis, public consultations, and regulatory result assessments. Also, we promote the periodic review of standards based on evidence. So we have a periodic review of our regulations. All should be reviewed in a certain frequency. We seek the transparency and constant dialogue with society, and we work towards convergence to international standards. And so all the regulation that Anvisa publishes is available in our website on this Anvisa Ledger system. So all the public consultations, all the regulatory impact analysis that were provided, they are available on this website. So regarding national and international relevance, Anvisa is an integral part of the Unified Health System, as I mentioned, and ensures the access to safe and effective products. The sectors regulated by the agency represents more than 25% of Brazil industrial GDP. And we have active role in different international forums such as the ICMA, ICH, IMDRF, ICCR, promoting international convergence and cooperation. So this is just a picture of different initiatives or different fora that we are taking part. So regarding international cooperation, ANVISA adopts the reliance mechanisms as to promote regulatory processes based on decisions of equivalent foreign regulatory authorities. We also maintain bilateral and multilateral agreements for inspections and recognition of good manufacturing practices. So just as mentioned by Lorena, we have a bilateral agreement with Argentina and MAT. And in this agreement, we recognize the free sale certificates and certificates for foreign government for classes 1 and 2 medical devices and classes A and B in vitro diagnostic medical devices between ANVISA and MAT. So this is something very precious for both agencies, and we consider this a very important objective in terms of reliance mechanisms that we have in place. Then reliance mechanisms for pre-market authorizations, as mentioned in the WHO Global Model Regulatory Framework, we have one possibility of abridged pathways, and this is the main pathway that ANVISA is putting in place in terms of reliance mechanisms. So regulatory procedures facilitated by reliance, whereby a regulatory decision is solely or widely based on the application of reliance. This usually involves some degree of work by the rely agency. So this is exactly what is happening for the medical devices registration process at ANVISA. And this is based on two regulations, so RDC 741 of 2022, which establishes the pathway for abridged review process. And we have a normative instruction specifically for medical devices and IVD medical devices, so IN 290/2024. With this, we have the product registration certificates from equivalent foreign regulatory authorities that may be used as a trigger for the abridged reviews by ANVISA. And at this moment, we consider certificates or authorizations issued by 4 different regulatory authorities. So Australia, TGA, Therapeutic Goods Administration, the Health Canada, and the US Food and Drug Administration, and the Japan Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare, together with the PMDA. So considering certificates issued by these 4 different regulatory authorities, we can speed up the review process of the registration of medical devices in Brazil. Just to make clear that this is applicable only for Class 3 and Class 4 medical devices, according to the specific regulations that we have in place for these different products in Brazil. And we have to keep in mind that product must be essentially identical. So the documentation proving registration or authorization issued by a regulatory authority must refer to the medical device essentially identical to the one intended to be registered in the national territory, and include the information related to the indications of use, intended use, and manufacturers. Also, we have the Brazilian labeling and specific requirements that must be fulfilled. So considering that the products would be available in Brazil, we have the information on the labels, and the instructions for use must be in Portuguese. So this is something that is a requirement that is necessary to keep. The medical devices subject to compulsory certification must meet the requirements of specific regulations. ANVISA also may perform the full assessment of the technical dossier submitted to the agency when we understand that something is not aligned with the reliance mechanism that we have in place. And again, Anvisa may request clarification regarding the documents submitted for review, just as usual for the ordinary process of registration. So with this, I would like to show you the importance of these reliance mechanisms for the performance of the agency in terms of the registration of medical devices. So if we have a look since January 2021, we have a very important increase in terms of number of submissions that we receive at Anvisa for medical devices. So in January 2022, we have on average 120 submissions every month, and we have realized that we had a very important increase in terms of the number of submissions. So to keep the pace of the review of these submissions, we have established in the past some strategies considering the risk of different products, possibility of different types of changes that we have for the registration processes of medical devices. And then in June 2024, we started to receive the first submissions based on Reliance. So up to now, from June 2024 to November 2025, we have received more than 300 submissions based on Reliance. And if we consider the trend that we have for the number of submissions of medical devices, we are expecting that in June 2026, we may reach more than 180 submissions every month. So the Reliance mechanism will provide a very important output of these submissions. Then, in terms of the distribution of these Reliance submissions that we receive at Anvisa, we have the majority of these submissions are for orthopedic implants. So 44% of the submissions. We have 42% for materials for medical use, 8% for electromedical equipment, and about 6% for IVDs, for in vitro diagnostics. So in the figure on your left, you can have the distribution on month by month. And regarding this submissions also, we have some information here in terms of how we used the Reliance petition for each registration process. So in blue, in light blue, you can see the number of submissions that we used the Reliance mechanisms itself, that we consider the certificate issued by a foreign authority in our review. In dark blue, you will see the number of submissions that we didn't consider during our assessment, during our review. And there is a very important reason for that, because in many cases, the submissions that we received will have differences in terms of intended use for the medical devices. So considering the rules that we have in the regulation, we have to have the same composition, the same products should be essentially identical in terms of composition, in terms of manufacturers, and especially intended uses. So this is the main reason why we have some negative results for these Reliance submissions. But we are working on that, and we are putting in place some strategies or webinars that are prepared by Anvisa to make clear to the companies that are submitting reliance submissions that these are very important conditions that we have in our regulation, and with that we can have a better result in terms of the review that we have for reliance processes. Then another point that I'd like to highlight is the work that Anvisa is involved in terms of the IMDRF, so the International Medical Devices Regulators Forum. Anvisa is part of the Good Regulatory Review Practices Working Group, and we have completed the development of the Reliance Playbook just at the beginning of this month, December 2025. And this document provides a structured and harmonized approach for regulatory authorities to implement reliance practices. It outlines key principles, definitions, operational models, and practical examples to support regulatory decision-making based on assessments performed by trusted authorities, enhancing efficiency, convergence, and regulatory capacity. And this document has been submitted to the IMDRF Management Committee, and we expect that the Management Committee consider its formal adoption in January 2026. So soon you have some news about this final document. And finally, just to give you an information about Anvisa project to become WHO-listed authority, Anvisa is implementing very strong efforts to become recognized as a World Health Organization listed authority. This recognition will attest that the agency operates at maturity level 4 and based on international standards of quality and independence. The project involves a robust WHO assessment of Anvisa system and practices and governance, and the inclusion in the WLA will strengthen Anvisa's international credibility and expand possibilities of reliance and mutual recognition. So this is something that the International Affairs Office of Anvisa is seeking with a very strongly. Finally, it is a strategic step to consolidate Anvisa's position as a global reference in terms of health regulation. So this shows how important all the convergence, regulatory convergence, and reliance processes are for the agency. So just a final message from Anvisa. Anvisa works every day to protect health of the Brazilian population. It operates with technical excellence, institutional responsibility, and focus on results. Our commitment is to the life, health, and sustainable development of the country. Then thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for the invitation for Anvisa, Sandra and Leticia. And I will be available for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Augusto. And yes, we're keeping the questions for the end of the session. So with this, I'd like to invite Angélica Zelaya. Angélica, listos para escuchar tu presentación y después proseguir con las preguntas y respuestas para todos los panelistas.
So we're going to go ahead with Angelica's presentation, and then we will go to the Q&A session for all our panel members. So thank you, Angelica, and welcome.
Listo. Buenos días a todos.
So good morning, everybody.
Es un gusto participar aquí
And
y
it's a
formar un
pleasure
equipo y
to be
tener la
here,
misma idea
to be
de una
part of
mejora
this team,
regulatoria,
and to have just the
pues, para
same
toda
idea
organización.
for
Y bueno, voy a
regulatory
empezar con
enhancement
lo que son
for
los
the whole
acuerdos de
the whole
equivalencia en
world and our
México
country
para
in this case.
dispositivos
So we're
médicos
going
y
to
la forma
begin
en
with
que
what
hemos
this
implementado en Reliance
reliance or
aquí.
equivalence agreements in Mexico have been used for medical devices and how we've also used reliance. I apologize, I'm having some technical difficulties. Just 1 second, please.
Listo. Esta diapositiva, quisiera empezar con esta
So
diapositiva
I would like
que,
to start with this
pues,
slide
de forma abreviada resume
because
toda
right
la
here we
transición que
can
ha pasado
summarize
México
and
para llegar a
see
Reliance.
the
Y pues como
timeline
podemos
and the
ver, pues
transition that
no ha
Mexico
sido
has
poco
gone
el
through to
tiempo
reach
que
the
hemos
point of
estado
reliance.
trabajando en esto.
And as you can
Todo
see,
comenzó
it's
desde el
not been
2010,
just
en
a
específico
small
el
amount of time
26
that
de
we've
octubre
been
del
working on
2010,
this. We
cuando se
started
firma
in
un acuerdo en
2010, in
específico
October the 26th of
con Estados
2010,
Unidos y
when we
Canadá.
signed a
Y bueno,
specific
en este
agreement with the
acuerdo
US and
se
Canada
plasman de forma muy gráfica
regarding
lo que son los requisitos tanto
what
técnicos como
the technical
legales para la
requirements
evaluación
and
de
the legal
dispositivos
requirements would be
médicos. Y es
for the
donde
assessment
empiezan
of medical
aquellos términos
devices.
de
And this
equivalencia,
is where we started
a
talking about,
afinar
I don't
hasta
know,
llegar
the
a Reliance,
equivalence
¿no? Y todo
terms and everything
el
that was
contexto que
before
abarca.
Reliance until
Eso
we
fue en
got
el
to Reliance
2010,
and the whole scope of
posteriormente
it.
en
That
el
was in
2012, en
2010.
específico el
Then in
25 de enero del
2012,
2012,
specifically
se firma
January
un acuerdo con
25 of
Japón
2012, we
que
signed
de
an
igual manera
agreement with
establece de
Japan,
manera puntual todos
which
los requisitos,
also
tanto legales como
establishes
técnicos,
all
para
legal
hacer
and technical
equivalente lo que son las
requirements
aprobaciones emitidas
for
ante Japón
equivalent
y
to
empezar a
make the
implementar lo que
approvals
fue
issued by Japan
ese
equivalent in
acuerdo.
Mexico and to start
Posteriormente, en el
implementing that agreement.
2021,
In
específicamente
2021,
2 de junio del 2021,
specifically in
se firman otro
July
acuerdo o sale un
22
acuerdo
of
del diario
2021, we
oficial
signed
donde
another agreement, or
se
it
dan
was another
atención
agreement was
por el tema
uh,
de alertas
published in
sanitarias
the
por
official
COVID,
gazette where they talk about the
un acuerdo. Entonces, de manera
sanitary related
simplificada se
alerts due
apega
to
a la
COVID,
evaluación de los
where we
dispositivos médicos
specifically uh,
y ahí es
talk
donde
about the
empezamos
assessment of
a
medical
observar
devices, and that
de manera
is
más
where
definitiva lo que es la
we
aplicación de un
specifically
Reliance
started seeing
como una
how
estrategia
Reliance
en la
was
atención de
being
trámites
applied, as a
prioritarios por el
strategy
tema de
to
COVID.
cover priority
Y
issues,
posteriormente
in
y
that
en la
case regarding
actualidad,
COVID.
surge
And
un
to
acuerdo, el
date,
primer acuerdo en el
we
2025,
had
el 11
a
de
first
junio del
agreement on
2025, el cual
2025, which was signed on
fue derogado por el
July,
acuerdo que
June
se
11th, I'm sorry,
publicó
of
el 18 de
2025,
julio del
where
2025 y que actualmente es
the
el que
agreement was
está
published,
vigente y
which
con
is
el
the
que
one that is
empezamos a
currently
trabajar todo el
enforced
tema
and
de
is the one that we use to
simplificación,
start working
reliance.
on
Entonces, bueno, como
simplification
podemos ver,
and
pues tenemos una
reliance and all of those
trayectoria
topics. So as you
que
can
hemos
see,
intentado
our
implementar y que bueno,
path
en el camino
has
ha
been
habido
long and we've
muchos
tried
cambios,
to
muchas
implement different
adecuaciones
things. I mean, we've
y
gone through many
como ya
changes,
mencionó
many
Brasil y Argentina,
adaptations,
nos
and
hemos
as
enfrentado a
Brazil and
varias
Argentina already
situaciones,
mentioned, we've also faced many
creo que muy similares,
situations
de todas maneras,
which
más
I
adelante se
believe
los
are
voy a
quite similar
explicar,
to
pero
those. I mean, I'm going to
tenemos
talk
más
about
o
those in a
menos las
moment, but
mismas
I think that
problemáticas,
we
pero bueno,
faced
en
the
eso
same
estamos, por un
issues.
cambio es
And these are the
alinearnos
things that
a
we've gone
nuevas
through,
formas.
for
Entonces,
those whole change and to align to these new ways of working.
ya mencionaron lo que fue de
So they
manera
mentioned
anticipada lo que son los principios de Reliance, pero me
already what
gustaría
the
volvérselos
Reliance
a
principles
mencionar porque
are, but I would just like to
en COFEPRIS, en
recap on them
México,
because
buscan
in buscamos
buscamos
and in
apegarnos lo
Mexico,
más
we're
posible a lo que es el
trying
Reliance y
to
tener muy
follow
presente lo que
through
son
with
los
Reliance as
principios
close as
de
possible
soberanía,
and to
no
be very
olvidar nuestra
clear
base
on what the
jurídica,
sovereign
una
principles are, never
competencia,
forget
la
our legal
uniformidad y
frame,
la transparencia. Y
and
bueno, todos
what is a
estos
competition
principios de
when we talk, what's
Reliance
uniformity
en
and
COFEPRIS
transparency, and all of
los
these principles.
implementamos
Reliance
al
principles
hacer
are being
esta
implemented in
convergencia regulatoria. Y
COFEPRIS
bueno, no
when
ahondo
we
más
do
en
this
estos términos
regulatory
porque bueno,
convergence. I'm
ya
not
han
going to go
sido
more in
tocados
depth
de
in these
manera
topics
puntual
because they've
por
already
mis
been mentioned very
compañeros.
specifically by my colleagues,
Y
but I
bueno,
just
vamos a
wanted to
entrar de
highlight them.
lleno de qué
And now
manera
we're going
estamos
to go
implementando el Reliance aquí
into
en
how we are
específico.
implementing Reliance here.
Tenemos lo que es el acuerdo del 18
Specifically,
de
we
julio del
have
2025
the
que ya se los
agreement
había
of
mencionado, que en este
July the
acuerdo
20,
entra en
18th
vigor
of
30 días
2025,
hábiles posterior
when
a
we
la
signed this
que es
agreement that I
publicado
mentioned
este
before,
acuerdo.
which is enforced 30 days,
actualmente estamos
30
trabajando en
business
este
days after
acuerdo,
it has been
continuamos,
published
es
in the
muy
official gazette,
reciente.
as I mentioned, so that it could be
Implementado
official. And we're
estrategias
working on
al
this
interior
agreement. It's quite
de
recent.
Cofepris
We're
para
implementing the internal
evaluar
strategies
estos
necessary
trámites
to be able
que se
to
someten por esta vía
assess all of
regulatoria.
the
Entonces, para
requests
empezar,
that or
este acuerdo
submissions
de
that are done through
simplificación
this
reconoce las decisiones de
regulatory
autoridades
pathway.
regulatorias de
So first of
referencia,
all, this
en
agreement
específico para
recognizes the
dispositivos
decisions of
médicos,
regulatory
los
authorities, the
miembros que
reference
pertenecen a
regulatory
la
authorities.
IMDRF.
Specifically for
En
medical
otra
devices,
diapositiva
we
voy a
talk
ampliar un
about
poco
those,
esta
the members of the
información. Y bueno, en
IMDRF.
específico son
I
los
mean, we're going
miembros
to
plenos del
talk about
programa
that
de
in a moment,
auditoría
but it's
única de
basically the whole
dispositivos
members
médicos de
of
MDSAP.
the MDA SAP,
En el
of
artículo
the audit
31
program
se establecen de
for
manera
medical devices.
puntual los
In
documentos
Article 31,
administrativos
they
legales, así
specifically
como la
talk
información
about the
técnica
legal and
con la cual debe de
regulatory and
cumplir
administrative
el
documents,
regulado
as well
para
as the technical
someterse a
information
esta
that the
revisión. Y bueno,
submission has to have
este
for
acuerdo
all of
nos
these
establece que
processes.
como máximo
And well,
tenemos
this
30
agreement
días hábiles
establishes
para
that we
emitir
have
una
at least we have
resolución
30 business
dentro de lo
days
que
as a
se
maximum
requiere.
to present
Esta es,
an answer to
creo
the
que, una parte
submission
fundamental
presented.
de
I
este
think
acuerdo.
that
Nos
this is
establece
one
que
of
el
the main
acuerdo que
parts
les
of
había
this
mencionado en el
agreement.
2010 y el
The
acuerdo del
agreement that we
2012
had
no fueron
presented that I
derogados,
mentioned in
siguen
2010 and
vigentes,
2012
pero
were
se
not
conjunta junto con este
derogated. They're
acuerdo
still in
todos
force, but
aquellos
together
miembros
with
que
this,
pertenecen a la
we include
IMDRF y
all
al
of those
MDSAP
members that
pueden someter por
that are
esta
part
vía,
of the
pero no fueron
IMDRF or the
derogados,
MDSAP
que
and that
fueron
could
los
be
otros
or
acuerdos.
could submit
Continúan
something through
vigentes,
this pathway,
obviamente
but
con
the others
algunos
have
cambios
not been
técnicos y
eliminated.
los
I mean, they
avances, el
continue.
tema de
Obviously, they have
digitalización, todo
some
eso lo estamos
digital
implementando,
changes and
pero
we are
no han sido
digitizing and
derogados
implementing all of that, but
los acuerdos que están
the
publicados del
agreements
2010 y del 2012.
published in 2010 and
Y bueno,
2012
para unar
have
un
not been
poco
eliminated. And
en la
to
forma
go
en que
more in depth
solicitamos
about
se plasme la
how
información
we
para
are
autorizar un
requesting this
registro
information
sanitario
to be
de
presented to request
dispositivos
a
médicos debe de ser
sanitary registry
tramitado
of a
de la
medical
siguiente
device.
manera.
The
Una
process
nueva
is as
OMI-CLAVE,
follows.
eso lo
First, we
establece
need a
el
new
acuerdo, en donde
number
es
or
04050 y
which
nuestra nueva
that's based on the
OMI-CLAVE
new
se
agreement,
llama
which is
Certificado de Registro
04050.
Sanitario de
But the new
Dispositivos
number
Médicos por
has the
equivalencia
nomenclature
y
has
autoridad de
to
referencia.
include this request for sanitary
Y bueno,
registry
los
of medical
requisitos
devices
aquí
based on
están divididos
equivalence
en dos,
by the
lo que es
reference regulatory
legalmente
authorities.
hablando y
And
de lo
here
que
we have
es
it divided
técnicamente
into what
hablando.
is
De
legally
forma
the
legal,
legal aspects and the technical
pues
aspects.
mantenemos lo que es la
Legally, we
soberanía
keep
y
the
nos apegamos a nuestros
sovereignty
artículos de
and
nuestra
we
ley del
are based
179 y
on
180, que son los que nos
Articles
rigen para la
179 and
evaluación de
180 of our
dispositivos
law,
médicos.
which are the ones that
Y de
are what
manera
we follow, the law we follow for medical
introductoria,
devices.
pues
And
para lo que es cuestiones técnicas, hay que presentar la
for technical
información
aspects, we need to
descriptiva del
present a
dispositivo médico
description
que tiene
of
que
this
tener lo que
medical
son las
device,
especificaciones de manera
which
general, porque obviamente
has to
depende del
include the
tipo de
specifications.
dispositivo
It has to be
médico
general specifications. I
y
mean,
el
obviously, it
tipo
all
de
depends on the
requisitos
type of
que se
medical device
solicitan.
and the type of
Entonces,
requirements that
sería
are
la
requested.
descripción y las
But it's more like
especificaciones del
just a
dispositivo
general
médico, un
description and the
resumen del proceso
specifications
de
of the
fabricación
medical
en donde,
device, a
pues bueno,
summary of the
ellos tienen que
manufacturing
plasmar de qué
process,
manera y
where
quiénes
the
participan en este
manufacturer has to
proceso
tell
de
us who
fabricación,
is involved in
pues
the
de manera
manufacturing
puntual.
process and what
Una
type of process are they
evaluación de
following,
la
and they have to be quite
conformidad
descriptive of that.
que se
We have a
presenta
conformity
conforme a la
assessment
naturaleza
done
y las
that is
características
based
del
on the
dispositivo
nature and the
médico.
characteristics of that
Aquí
medical
es donde
device.
nosotros
And
tomamos en cuenta la evaluación previa que se hizo en la
this is
autoridad
where we consider the
regional que
prior
dio la
assessment
aprobación
done
para este
by
dispositivo y
the
nosotros
reference
la
authority
tomamos,
that approved this device
como bien lo
previously.
dicen los
And we
principios de
take that
Reliance, de manera
assessment, you know,
parcial
as
o
the
total.
reliance principle
Tomamos
says,
en
we can
cuenta de
take it
manera parcial la
as a
información que
whole
se
or
presenta
as a
en
partial
dichas
presentation and
aprobaciones
submission of the
y las
information.
cuales esta información debe estar
And
conformada en
this
el resumen
information has to
los procesos
include
y las pruebas que se
a
fueron
summary of
hechas
the
para
processes
cada
as
uno de los
well as the
dispositivos que
tests that were
soliciten.
carried out for
Pues
each
de
one of the
manera
devices that
en general deben de presentar lo que es la
generally
descripción de cada
request or
envase
that, I mean,
primario y lo
they
que
have to
conlleva
present the
para la
description of a
evaluación
primary
de este
packaging
empaque a
and
través de
what is a
una
part
evaluación
of this
clínica y toda la
packaging and
normatividad
all the
que le
clinical
aplique
assessment that they did,
al
as well as
dispositivo médico,
any type of
un
standards that
análisis de
apply to the
riesgo,
medical device.
un
It also has to
certificado de
include a
análisis
risk
o
analysis,
certificado de producto
an analysis certificate or a finished product certificate. And something that's also really important, especially in this time, the surveillance report becomes really, really important. And it's one of the key points of all the submissions. So here I generally spoke about the requirements of this agreement. Now, we talked about the countries that are participating or that we considered to be part of the reliance process. And well, the member states that we all know about is Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, the European Union, Japan, Russia, Singapore, South Korea, Switzerland, United Kingdom, and the US. And I highlighted these three countries that they're in bold, which is Canada, Japan, and the United States, because I wanted to highlight with them, I wanted to highlight in this case that we have agreements with these countries that haven't been eliminated, and we continue implementing the agreements that we had from 2010. And now we have Reliance, and we have a strategy to assess medical devices that says that with the countries that are aligned to the IMDRF, we will continue working in that process. As I said, this is quite recent, and we are implementing the necessary strategies and the changes that are required within COFEPRIS to follow through with this. And we not only have this agreement, we have other agreements and conventions. I included here the ones that have the largest impact in regulatory aspects for medical devices. The first one was on July 11th of 2025, which established changes for the modification assessment and the free sale certificate for medical devices. Then the one that I mentioned, which is of July 18th of 2025, which talks about equivalences or reliance, which is the one that we're currently working on. And then we have one of August the 22nd of 2025, which have to do with reducing nomenclature numbers and simplifying all the requirements for sanitary registry and extensions for medical devices. These are not the only agreements that have been published in 2025, but these are without any doubt the ones that have the largest impact on the sanitary registry of medical devices based on reliance. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about how we've worked on the simplification and how we started working specifically on reliance. And to do that, well, I'm going to start by talking about the simplification of the nomenclature. In the past, we had a larger number of nomenclatures because of the type of country that we're requesting that for the medical devices. The first one that we have now, which is the 04050, is to sanitary registry of medical devices due to equivalence issued by the reference regulatory authority. And this is one of the most important changes that we have, which is simplification in the processes to request the formats and to register these devices. And obviously, when we talk about this nomenclature, the first one has to do with the topic that we just talked about. But we need to remember that we also have other conventions that have to do with the regular way of assessing a medical device, which is the 04060 nomenclature, as well as those that are considered low risk, which is the 04070, the 04090 for extensions, and the certificates to support the goods export for health-related products. It's the 05017. In the past, we had a larger number of these nomenclatures or standards that they could use to ask for this. And so this is a really important step, because now we have a change in the forms, how to apply them within, how we could develop the standard for the regulators to use it. This has been quite complicated, because we have to provide internal and external training to achieve this, and it's the first step to make an important change. So we're still working on that, and we're taking into consideration all of those forms. Now, we had this nomenclature, as I said before, which is for the equivalences. This was in the past of 401 D, E, F, and G, D, E, F, G, and H. And this was specifically for medical devices submissions that have equivalence with any of the countries that I mentioned before. Now, this is simplified, and we're only going to have the 0450 for all of these. When the user is filling out the request for submission for medical devices, they're going to have a screen where they can specifically request or say the type and subtype that they can base that medical device in. And that's where they need to choose if they do this with FDA for class 1, class 2, class 3, or if they're going to do it for Canada with class 2, class 3, or class 4, or if they're going to follow through with Japan or for other medical devices. And the last one has to do if it's going to be other regulatory authorities, reference regulatory authorities that are not the previous ones that I mentioned. And then we also added important definitions that we use to assess medical devices. First, we need to do the merchandising authorization, the reference regulatory authority, the acknowledgement, and the abbreviated or abridged regulatory pathway. So these concepts are part of are already published. It's part of what has been published in the Official Gazette. We all know these terms, and this is what we've focused on to what we were working on. And here we established the general provisions for medical devices to acknowledge this abridged pathway. That's the first one. The submit the request person requesting has to present all the evidence for the sanitary registry or the certificate issued by an acknowledged authority. COFEPRIS still has the power to carry out any additional reviews or request information that maybe the submission is not included to assess that medical device. And as I said, we have 30 business days to assess those requests, those medical devices requests. And we use acknowledgement, we use optimized processes. We still have our autonomy as COFEPRIS, the sanitary authority, but we're trying to achieve this agility and to do these abridged procedures, complying with our legal basis, but trying to guarantee always efficiency and safety of all of these medical devices. We have some exclusions, which are specifically mentioned in Article 20, and which has to do with the type of approval that our ARR issued. So based on this, this type of approvals, those medical devices that have some sort of conditioned approval or that were approved just because of an emergency situation or any type of approval that have been issued by these authorities in these cases could not be considered in this case. And this is specifically stipulated in Article 20 of the agreement I mentioned before. And on March 20th of 2025, the guidelines for good manufacturing practices of medical devices was issued. And this is an agreement that includes sanitary registries, extensions, and modifications. This was enforced the day after it was published in the Official Gazette. And this agreement recognizes the assessment of good manufacturing practices carried out by another ARR, like the MDSAP or the ISO 13485, the ISO 13485 2016 certificate by an accredited or certified organization, the CE certificate by the European Union, or a statement of CLV issued by the ARN, where they specifically say that they have good manufacturing practices. So this also follows through that simplification topic, and the acknowledgement of all the other agencies that could present the certificate. And we also have the responsibility of a regulated sector. The first and most important thing is to acknowledge that the sector is understanding the regulatory framework that they want to follow through or comply with to present their submittal for medical devices. The other one is to understand the documentation, the country they're going to send it to, or that they're going to receive it from, what are the conditions that they have and how that they approve their regulatory aspects. The fact that we are with Reliance doesn't mean that we are complying with all the regulatory aspects that we have here in Mexico. So we need to make sure that we have it. And so we have a list of the documentation that the other country requests regarding that authorization, especially, for example, a pharmaceutical beam that was issued in another country, and it was issued as a medication, and that request, that submittal comes to the area of the medical devices area, but they are not following that intended use or the final use that that agency had for that specific product, which was a medication, because it has a different type of name. It is a medication. It is not a medical device. And when they try to come in here and we try to do that assessment, well, we see that it didn't comply with the requirements of a medical device, even if it did have the approval from another country. But for us, it wasn't like that. So we could not follow through with that to use it as a medical device here in Mexico, because the way that we are regulating medications and medical devices was different, as it happens in many other places. So the regulators, the regulatory sector needs to understand if this device could be used as Reliance or not, or if it's following through with our regulation or not, and request it as a medication or as a medical device. I mean, we have to be very clear with that difference. So this is one of the issues that we have to face.
And well, we also have some key actions we are working on, which include the strengthening of our own regulatory framework to align it to a streamlining path to facilitate and promote trust between the regulated agency and the regulated being and different countries and approvals. All of those medical devices that we know that they're in compliance with international standards and can guarantee that, well, and being flexible in the assessment of those devices, and to have a regulatory efficiency that we are still working on through the adjustment of internal processes, a transition towards a Reliance approach that has helped us to modify the workflows, the review criteria that documents the technical functional parameters within COFEPRIS. It's been a very important work that we've done, and well, creation of awareness and of our staff. This transition, there was a certain resistance to change, and it was complicated because we have had to become more sensitive, starting us, the people who coordinate other people, to try and understand how people work in other countries and inspiring trust. It was complicated, but we are still working on that, and we're looking for getting closer to the IMDRF and other agencies, so that through classes, chats, we can better understand the assessment of devices in those countries, so that people can feel more at ease. That is the path that we have ahead of us. That's what we have been working on. And to wrap it up, regarding the request of sanitary registries nowadays, ordinary requests this year in 2024-2025 was of 2,206 requests, out of which the Reliance requests amounted to 372. Only this year we observed that it was an important amount for us to work with Reliance. The regulators have been betting on this path. In Reliance, procedures have become more and more relevant, and our objective is to convey that we believe in Reliance and that we are open to keep it growing. Thank you very much for the invite, and thank you for listening to our experiences and challenges. Thank you, everyone.
Angélica, muchísimas gracias por tu
Angélica, thank you very much for having participated. Now I'm going to invite Lorena and Augusto to please join us. Please open your cameras so that we can start with a Q&A. Since we have received several questions for everyone, I will start reading one per speaker, and according to how we do in terms of the time, we'll start another round of questions. Let us start with ANMAT. The question says, ANMAT has already implemented clear reliance mechanisms, and they are more and more aligned to the IMDRF initiatives. Do you have plans for a formal regulation that is explicit for how ANMAT is adopting reliance according to the definitions of the WHO? Well, let me start by saying that I have with me people from the evaluation office as well as of the international program. So I formally request their help to answer the questions. So if you would like to open your microphones and answer that specific question so that you can tell people how we are working our alignment with the WHO and the questions.
Sí, se me escucha bien.
Yes, can you hear me?
A
Yes.
todos, mi nombre es
Hello,
Jessica
everyone.
Anastasio,
I am
coordinadora del
Jessica
programa
Anastasio.
Relaciones
I coordinate the International Affairs Program. So, first of all, I would like to congratulate all of the colleagues and agencies for the wonderful presentations that have been shared. Now, regarding the question, we would like to say that we have already been working in this alignment, especially in our reliance guidelines. It is a public document, you can consult it, and that's where you will find all of the regulations that will be coming in the future, because as the COFEPRIS colleague has said, we are invited to streamline procedures. And so specifically to answer your question, our manual is based in the annex of report, WHO report of 2021. And so we are already in alliance. And this is how we're answering this consultation. If you have any further questions, we will be around. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that answer. Now, let me add up by saying that quite definitely it is an ongoing process. It's a journey. And the fact that ANMAT already has a manual is a way in which other things will come, and the transition to a formal regulation will be aided. And it seems to me that it is a great incentive for the regulator and for the regulated sector, so as when the active regulation and the practices begin, everyone is on the same page. And I would like to add that specifically, we have the intention of coming up with a reliance manual for medical devices. There'll be a specific one for this matter, so you can look forward to that. Wonderful, good news. Thank you very much. Now, I have a question for Anvisa. What are the challenges that you have faced in the implementation of 2019-94 on the procedure of optimized analysis for the request of trading of medical devices? Do you have a guideline, a procedure for ANVISA's officials so that they can have a checklist for the assessment? Can we have access to it? How can we learn more about the equivalences?
Yes, so we have had some challenges during the implementation of this normative instruction. I think that especially is the first point was to work with our experts to talk to them. Okay, we are planning to have this new approach for medical devices registration using Reliance. So in terms of this discussion, internal discussion, we had to make very clear to all our experts that we are not going to give up of the review that are being performed by ANVISA. So we're still sovereign in terms of that the final decision is still ANVISA's decision. And so I think that this was the first big challenge that we have during this process. After we have the implementation of this normative instruction, the main issue that we identified is that the clarity of the information for the companies that intend to use the Reliance process. Because as I tried to show you, we have identified many submissions of different products, So we have submissions that, okay, we have the same manufacturer, the same composition, but with different intended use. And when we received a certificate informing that you have this same product, but the foreign authority didn't assessed that different intended use, okay, we will not be able to use this certificate to finish or to breach our review. So this is the main reason why we had some negative results for Reliance submissions. Then in terms of the a specific guidance for the experts that are providing these assessments, we have an internal guidance. This is a document that is not public yet, but I believe that in the future we may have a version that could be provided publicly. This is something that is as a responsibility of the Medical Devices Office, and we expect that we may have some information available. But we have internally, we have some rules for the review of these products, considering Reliance and considering especially composition, what information should be provided on the certificates or the documentation of external authorizations. I'm not sure if I answered the 3 questions. I think I have this noted, but okay, great, thank you.
I get you did. If we missed something, I'll appreciate for whomever asked the question to let us know. Okay. And Augusto, it is interesting. I mean, you're mentioning an example on how a product that was intended to be approved under the abridged pathway reliance mechanism was not meeting the requirements to be submitted through that pathway because the indication for use was not the same. And it is kind of like the same example as Angelica was mentioning for Mexico. So I think that in here, we, as regulated sector, do have a very relevant responsibility to facilitate your work and to help all of us for all these mechanisms to really become a success and to really deliver the way they were designed to. So I invite all the attendees to this session for us to continue working, learning, understanding the requirements, and making sure that whenever we're applying for one of these mechanisms, sameness is demonstrated beforehand and not to wait for the national regulatory authorities to come back and tell us, by the way, this is not the same. Because then we're all wasting resources. It is not only the manufacturers putting together these dossiers, but having the national regulatory authorities taking the time to come up to that conclusion. So I think this is a core responsibility, and I think we all need to continue to learn. This is very brand new for all of us. So I think we have a responsibility for us to continue to prepare ourselves in a much better way to make them produce the results that we're expecting. And for that, we, as always, offer our help for capacity building whenever it is required, wherever it is required, for all relevant stakeholders. You know, our work is to make sure that whomever has a say in our sector, whomever has a relevant role in our sector, that we can touch through the capacity building efforts that we generally put together. And again, this is a common effort for us, all of us, to succeed. So I always take advantage of having the microphone, but hopefully this is helpful for all of us. And now I'm going to go to Cofepris with one question. Buenos días. En el caso de México, estos mecanismos exitosos de reliance.
In the case of Mexico, the successful reliance mechanisms, how have they affected the approval times? Have they changed? Well, the agreement has established that there are 30 days. We have already analyzed medical devices for that type of registry, as I mentioned, the Homoclave, for the streamlining agreement. And so far, it's going well. The procedure is moving ahead, but it is brand new. It started on July 11th. And so many things had to be updated in our website, in the requirements, and informing people. So that is why I cannot give you a tangible final result, but specifically for me, it's very exciting to see this because it is a good change. It's a 360-degree change of the way in which I used to do assessment and follow regulations only according to Mexican perspectives. And by that, I do not mean that it was different from other places, but it's a global change. And of course, we want to be aligned. And the change starts with us, with how we're convinced and convince our own people. It hasn't been easy and it hasn't been too long. There are some people who still need training, who still need experience. We are learning on the go. So in my office and all throughout Cofepris, what I can say is that we're excited about the change. We know it's needed. It is needed for Mexico. And we look forward to it because it will help us to have better, safer medical devices in a quicker way. And not only in Mexico, but around the world. And that's a good thing.
Muchas gracias, Angélica. We are running
Thank you,
short on
Angélica.
time, and we have a long list of questions in our Q&A, so I'll really be welcoming the opportunity to invite you to a follow-up session in the near future, and also to help us replying back to the questions that we have. We could share those with you in writing, so we would be very, very grateful if you could help us providing answers to those. But before closing this panel, really, thank you very much for all the information and the experience that you shared. And I would like to invite each of you, Lorena, Augusto, Angélica, to share like a 1-minute closing comment in regards of your recommendations, in regards of how do you see we can better work together to make Reliance a success. Thank you. Lorena.
Sí, ¿qué tal? Bueno, a ver, vamos a hacer un cierre.
Okay, some
Realmente
final remarks.
creemos que el
Reliance is a strategy,
porque no estamos solos en este mundo,
and we're not alone.
confiar en
No
otras
man is an
acciones,
island.
nosotros seguimos
Trusting
en
others
hacer
is
procesos
key.
mucho más
And when we trust, we can be more effective. We don't waste time. We can devote our efforts in smarter ways. So participating in international fora, just like we are doing today, is something that helps us a lot. It is so wonderful to listen to colleagues from Brazil and Mexico, learn from them. And it's inspiring. We learn, it's nourishing. And all of those mechanisms, and MDRFF, MDSAP, meetings like this, Mercosur as well, they are our highly valuable strategies. We have a highly consolidated team of international workers as a map, people who are fully committed to the implementation of all those tools. And so we are strengthened to be able to work together towards a smarter reliance regulation. And for that, I thank you all. Thank you, Lorena. Augusto?
Sí. Bueno, I think that we are putting a lot of efforts in this reliance mechanism at Anvisa, and this is something, as mentioned by our panelists, this is something that is a journey. So it takes long. So we need to be patient and sometimes to make all the steps work, but at the end of the day, the idea is to have faster access to quality products in the market. So this we know that all jurisdictions, all authorities may have limited resources to review medical devices submissions, and for Anvisa is the same. So we need to use the effort, the work that are available from our colleagues from different regulatory authorities to make this process easier, not only for us, but also for the industry. And yes, and to have faster access. I think this is the main goal for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Augusto. Angélica, palabras de cierre.
Closing remarks,
Bueno,
please.
para mí,
Well,
la palabra más importante,
the
creo,
operative word, I believe,
confianza.
is trust.
Nosotros, el confiar en nosotros mismos es
Trusting
algo personal que lo
ourselves
llevamos
is
a
the
cabo en
first
toda
step,
nuestra vida, no solo
but
de
we
forma
need to
personal.
promote that not only
Confiar en otra
personally but
agencia
professionally.
es
So
complicado.
start working
Dar
with
ese
our own
paso,
self-trust,
como
trusting our
dicen
agencies,
mis
trusting
colegas, a
others,
mí me da
trusting people
mucho
we do
gusto
not
que
know.
estemos platicando de cómo se ha
It's a
llevado
journey,
todo
and
en
I'm
estos
very
países.
happy to listen
Pues
to
que
other
estamos
people's experience so
orgullosos
that we
de
don't feel alone.
pertenecer
I
a
feel
nuestros
proud
países y de ver
to
por el bien
belong
común de nuestro
to
país. Y
what
aquí pues
our countries
todos
are
estos
doing for
acuerdos
the
que se
common
generan y que buscan
well-being
al
of
fin y al cabo
all the world.
implementar
The agreements
para la
have that
salud en
goal
específico
to
ahorita
improve
un
the health of
avance
all
y introducir
humankind.
todos estos
So the
dispositivos
introduction of
médicos de
this
otros países que fueron evaluados, que son seguros,
reliance mechanism so that we can use devices from other countries.
política al interior de COFEPRIS.
It
Sin
was
embargo,
controversial in the beginning,
seguimos
perhaps,
trabajando
COFEPRIS,
en tanto
but little by little we're
formatos, la forma
surpassing
en que
the
evaluamos
objections.
estos,
We're
a los
changing the
países,
way in
cómo,
which we
qué
assess
tomamos, qué no
countries,
tomamos de
the
este
things we
país
adopt
para
or do
hacer
not
en
adopt
conjunto
from others. How do we not
revisión de
negotiate
registros para dispositivos
our
médicos.
understanding
Lleva mucho trabajo,
for
pero
registering
me
a
uno
medical
lo que han
device is
mencionado
a
mis
lot of
compañeros.
work, but
Seguimos
I
trabajando
also believe that it's
muy fuerte, con
a
mucho
worthwhile
gusto,
effort,
pues
and we feel
siempre
very
con las
happy
ganas
and
de
pleased
compartir
to
nuestras
keep on
experiencias,
working
nuestros
on it, and
conocimientos
we
para
feel
un
very
bien común.
happy to share our experiences and knowledge.
Angélica, muchas gracias. Well, again, Lorena, Augusto, Angélica, thank you very much for sharing your experiences, and we look forward to continue this conversation more and more and more, and to continue to learn from each other. Count on us on these efforts. We are here to help. All of us are guided by the same purpose, and is to make sure that patients in our region do have timely access to safe, quality, and performing to design medical devices. So thank you very much. And we invite you to stay with us for our next session that is related to medical technology sector map, Brazil and the Americas. And we are honored to have Leticia Fonseca, who is the Executive Secretary for the Coalition for Brazil and Deputy Executive Secretary for the Coalition, and Marina Calvario, our coalition lead also for the Inter-American Coalition. So Leticia and Marina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Good. Thank you. Just a second, please. I'll share my screen. Yes. I think I know it's okay. Can you see the screen?
Now is good. Now is good.
Let's go. Sorry. Yes. Very quickly. The study organized economic, productive, and regulatory information on the medical device sector in six countries: Brazil, Argentina, Canada, Colombia, Mexico, and the United States. And the purpose of this study is the central question we address is, how can regulatory authorities balance growing demands and increasing technological complexity with limited resources? And important, what lessons Brazil can learn from our international experience? In this slide, you can see the global medical devices market. Globally, the medical device market is expected to grow from 542 billion in 2024 and to 886 billion in 2032. And the leading segments are the therapeutic devices with more than 25%, implantable and in vitro diagnostics. When we look to the regions, North America leads the market with more than 38% of the market. When I look to Brazil, we have the market size in 2024, we actually 15 billion, representing an increase of 11% over 2023. The IVD segment expansion is the highest one, with a growing high rate at 28%, leading the market performance in 2024. And when we talk about imports and exports, Brazil exports 852 million and imports more than $8 billion. When you look to these country indicators, we can see that the population of the United States and the Brazil are the upper in the region, and highlight that the health expenditure in Brazil was 9.89% of the incomes. In terms of convergence, Brazil, Canada, and the United States are foundation members of the MDSAP and IMDRF, and all of them are part of the management committee. And Argentina is official observer, and Colombia is affiliated member of the IMDRF, and Mexico is an affiliated member of IMDRF and MDSAP. The slide 8, in terms of risk classification, the statement brings information about regulation and risk classification aligning. Argentina and Brazil have harmonized in Mercosul, which were based on European Union Regulations 745 and 746 from 2017, respectively for medical devices and IVD medical devices. For medical devices, Health Canada and INVIMA adopted the reference of the Directive 93 42 also from European Union. And the United States, they does not adopt classification rules. They use a database that are available more than 1,700 genetic types classified and grouped into 16 different medical specialties called panels. And for COFEPRIS, unfortunately, we can't compare the risk classification because the risk classification is available only at FEUM, the Pharmacopeia, and by purchases is required. In terms of legal decision time, we have a lot of different, we look at for the risk class, the maximum risk class, and we can see that COFEPRIS is the lowest time with 30 and 35 days, business days, and Anvisa have three different classifications of three different legal decision time frame. For IVD, 1 year, for equipment, 250 days. AMAT uses 110 days, and US FDA, the rules are defined by the MDUFA, the medical devices user fee amendments, and can vary from 29 days in 2024 and 28.5 in 2025. And we can see also that the fees vary a lot, since the INVIMA with $1,000 and until United States, when the fee can be around 500,000. 500, yeah, 1,000. We put some information, the study try to use informations about the time used by institutions to publish high-risk products. The logical usage is since the beginning, when the company entry with a petition in the National Regulatory Authority, and the finish of this time. For the legal time for IVD, in this case, we can see the green line. This line is about the legal time, 355 days. And now here we can see the quantity, and here the time, average time used by Anvisa to publish the registration. In this case, especially for class 3 and 4 publications. We had a total of 648 registration, and when you think about notification, we had more than 1,000 notifications. It's a lot of work, but the IVD area stay below the legal deadline. For equipment, the average range from 82 to 145, and all average times were below the legal deadline. The total number of registers and notifications in this period was 418, and more than 1,030 notifications. For orthopedics and implantable materials, class 4 and 3 and 4, the average time to market was consistently above the legal deadline through the period we analyzed. And this area suffers a serious shortage of human resource, with average time ranging from 2,285 to 503 days, and a total of 292 registrations. These delays have a direct impact on product availability. And we see the same situation in the area of medical materials, which has the highest demand for product regularization and also suffers from a shortage of professionals. Average times ranged from 359 to 303, with a total of 263 registrations and more than 4,000 notifications. When we look to Canada, the data is segmented by risk class. For class 2, we can see that although the actual license times were longer than the estimated timelines, there was a clear decrease over the period. During this period, a total of 1,043 licenses were granted, and the average time ranging from 44 and 64 and 23 days. It's important to highlight that the average time show represents the difference between the date the application was submitted and the date it was approved. It's very important because you can see some times that spend a lot of time, but sometimes this time is related with the industry to answer some questions or some problem that was identified by the national authority, the National Regulatory Authority. For class 3 license, the average time ranging from 188 to 280 days, and a total of 300 licenses, more than 300 licenses. And for class 4, the same, the average time ranging from 193 to 245, and the timeline is 90 days, and a total of license was 60 licenses during the period. For the United States, for the average time for device notification has been longer than the deadline established under the MEDUFA, the Medical Device User Fee Amendments, and the average time ranging from 142 to 178, and with a total of 3,024 petitions, remarkable approvals. And for pre-market approval, and the average time ranged from 1,208. No, sorry, 208, not 1,000, and to 907 days, with a total of 33 approvals. The data on average approval times across countries highlights that the need for a stronger collaboration among regulators in order to make the best use of the available resources and expertise available. And one of these tools is Reliance that we told about in the previous panel. Finally, I'd like to share some finds that from the survey that was conducted to map the perception of the regulatory sector about the performance of Anvisa and the Metro in process related to regularization of medical devices. Strengths of Anvisa, the perception of the sector. Regulatory alignment with international practices, digitalization submissions through the Solicita systems, adequacy and proportionality of required documentation according to product risk. And the main structural bottlenecks in Brazil is related to slow review of registration. The slowness in review is perceived as incompatible with the sector dynamism, insufficient human resource. The workforce of GGTPS, the staff in July of this year were 48 members, and only one more person than when we look to 2015. And in 2020, in 2016 was related, estimated that the workforce for the area is of 112 professionals. Another big problem that was analyzed is the instability of the data visa. The system is considered a bottleneck in terms of performance and stability. And other point is the duplication of requirements. Anvisa in Metro, criticism regarding overlapping requirements and bureaucracy, although in Metro certification is recognized as adding value to staff. And the next steps, we are making the final revision of the document, and the publication is expected by February 2025. Sorry. Thank you. Marina is here with me, and I'm open to questions. Sandra?
Leticia, sorry, I was having a problem to open my microphone, but now I have it in here. So, well, for the first, thank you very much. Congratulations. I think this is very valuable information that you have consolidated. I think it should have been a challenge to consolidate all that information in just such a short time. So we're definitely enthusiastic to wait till February to get the final report published and make all this great research available for all of the coalition members, ABIS members, and the public in general. I think we all can benefit out of all these analysis and comparisons, and as they serve as a wonderful learning opportunity for all of us, identifying or trying to identify ways to add efficiency to the work that we do and to make it as effective as possible. So I don't see any question here. So I'd like to invite probably Marina to share some final comments, and Leticia as well, and to invite our audience if they would also like to pose a question live, that we can do that as well. So Marina.
Thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Leticia, for being our speaker today. It's been a year of very deep research that Leticia and I performed. I think the study has some very interesting insights because we are bringing the data on these particular countries in relation to how they perform registration and in pre-market, and how is the procedure, and comparing the procedures was a very rich experience, because we could see, for instance, where they don't, the procedures are different one from each other, and that's very significant, because if you want to compare countries and you don't have like similar approaches, it becomes much more challenging to do that. So I think that was a very, very strong challenge that we faced, and Leticia and I discussed very much on this. And another insight that I would like to highlight, and with this I'm going to close my remarks, is the research that we did on the survey. We had dozens of responses, and that was particular to Brazil and the system of how Brazil and Anvisa and Inmetro interact in the medical devices registration process. And this survey is very, very important, because it brings the image how the private sector sees the authorities and see the efforts the authorities are doing in their work. we can see where we have strengths, but also where we can work together to improve the system in Brazil and also to support the authorities in relation to a better system for registration and in the end of the day, quality products with better quality for consumers. So I think it's a very interesting study. It's very long. This is only a sample like that we brought to you. And we really hope you enjoy when we publish beginning of next year. Thank you so much, Sandra, for the opportunity again.
Thank you.
Yes.
Leticia, any closing comments?
Yes, no, just add that it's a very important document because I don't know if there is something that talks about so deep about these countries. And it was possible to identify some opportunities of change in our regulation in Brazil that can help to reduce the problems that Anvisa have with timelines related with the workforce that is too small for all the companies, the agents. And thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And with this, we're coming to the end of our external stakeholder session, and we come to an end related to the celebration of the 5th anniversary of the coalition. Again, thank you very much for everybody that has been involved in the work that we have been doing. It has been really an honor to be part of this community, that it is becoming stronger and stronger. And we have also been honored, all of the members of the coalition, to have developed the trust of very relevant subject matter experts coming from all relevant sectors, starting with the national regulatory authorities that have been very generous in sharing their experiences, their knowledge, and from all over the world. It has become, the Inter-American Coalition has really become like a global community because expertise is available everywhere in the world. And again, we have been benefited out of the generosity of experts coming from every corner in the world, like Australia, Singapore, the US, Argentina, Canada, all over the place, and from all different areas that do have an impact and that are interested in collaborating to making sure that everything that we do will really have an impact on the patients, not only in the region, but also in the rest of the globe, For that, we are really very appreciative of all your support, and we continue to offer all the work and the commitment of the coalition members of the technical secretariat to help us dealing with the challenges that we have ahead. You know me, and I keep repeating myself over and over again. This is a matter of core responsibility. We all have a role to play. We all have something to contribute to help regulators, to help manufacturers, to help physicians, to help users of medical devices to do the best they can with the technology that should be available for all patients every place in the world. So with it, again, thank you very much and look forward to see you soon, because it is obvious that we need to continue to have these conversations. Time is never sufficient, so look forward for the next opportunity for all of us to be together in here. Thank you very much, and thank you very much again for all the supporters of the work of the coalition. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Thank you.